Hello and welcome to the Stories of Northern Life podcast. In honor of Museum Month, we are going to dive into the museum's history and how it started back in 1902. So let's start at the beginning as the Sault Ste. Marie Historical Society. It really was a group of avid history buffs, beginning to try and form a local historical society through the Ontario Historical Society. The first attempt was made in 1902. The Historical Society was finally officially formed and adopted by the City Council on August 17, 1920. They had 27 members with a wide array of occupations, from judges and lawyers to educators, priests, laborers, and artists. Judge Frederick Stone was elected as the honorary president. They also elected John W. Lee B. Ross as president, John T. McKay as vice president, Tracy E. Carmichael as secretary, J. Hayes Jenkinson as treasurer, E. Ross McKay as editor, and Miss Dorothy Carls as curator. They asked for affiliation with the Ontario Historical Society, and on October 31st, 1921, the Sault Ste. Marie Historical Society was incorporated with the Ontario Historical Society. They hoped that this affiliation would allow them to supplement the gathering of facts in regards to the Sault Ste. Marie and the surrounding district. The society began to make plans about what they would begin to research. They wanted to conduct oral history interviews of the older residents of the city. They aimed to collect and preserve the historical recordings of the Sioux. The members also planned to write and deliver papers at a regular monthly meeting. Within their first year, they did just that, holding 5 public meetings and delivering 4 papers. They collected the papers and assembled them into a book along with reports from the society, entitled The Sault Ste. Marie Historical Society Papers and Records. The cost of the publication was $158. They were expecting to receive a grant that would cover the cost. However, they were unable to get any money. They had hoped to publish the oral histories in a later volume, but due to the cost, they only ever published one. The society had gathered roughly 63 books and pamphlets for their library during this time, which was about 20 years' work, and they hoped to continue to build the library to aid in the members' research. The Historical Society went on to present more papers, collect items for the library, and even attempt to have 3 historical plaques to be installed around the city. However, in 1924, the society vanished. There is no clear reason as to why or what happened, but it is speculated that it was due to the lack of funding. After the publication of their first and only annual report, the society was left with a debt of $158. They repeatedly tried to apply for grants or other funding to pay off the debt and continue to research and collect the history of the area. Therefore, they eventually had to disband because there was no money to keep the society afloat. But on January 26, 1951, after a 27-year hiatus, the Sault Ste. Marie Historical Society re-emerged. 2 members of the original society came out to participate in the discussion of forming a military and local history society. The 2 members were T. E. Carmichael, the original secretary, and S. G. Stone, an original member. Lieutenant Colonel Derrier had asked the Department of Defense if they could have a museum and library in the new armory that was being under construction. The Department of Defense had agreed to supply the space. However, the society would be responsible for the furnishings. And as civilians, if they were to use the space, they would have to pay a rental fee. Therefore, it was decided that a joint civilian and regimental historical society would be formed, meaning the Sault Ste. Marie Historical Society would now become the Sault Ste. Marie Heavy Anti-Aircraft Regiment R.C.A. Historical Society. In November 1951, the elected board was Sir James Dunn as honorary president, John A. McFally as honorary vice president, Charles Agnew as president, and K. J. Ross and Dean Jennings as vice presidents. Sir James Dunn was also the president of Algoma Steel at this time, and he provided the furnishings for the museum upon learning it was the responsibility of the Historical Society to furnish the room. And he made sure that it was done up well with every detail accounted for.
Lieutenant Colonel Derrier wanted to ensure that the museum was properly designed.
He wrote to military museums in Canada and Great Britain for their input and suggestions. The Society received annual grants totaling $500 from the city and Algoma Steel to stay afloat. In 1954, Captain F.F. Metcalfe of Toronto noticed a few flaws in the museum's design. He noted that there were no workshop, nor storage and record space for the archive collection. This meant that they could not store any new documents or artifacts that they collected. The museum could simply not grow. The Society had 1,500 square feet of space, and the issue of space continued to be an increasing problem. Other issues that became apparent was that the space was not easily accessible for the public. The museum, number one, was only open Wednesday afternoons between 2 and 4. The visitors had to navigate their way through the armories. The hallways were said to be very confusing, and they had to climb several flights of stairs to reach the museum. This confusion may have led to visitors refusing to attempt the navigation. Another thing that Captain Metcalfe pointed out was that some of the artifacts lack context. They were not properly labeled, if at all. The Society took this advice, and in 1956 they hired a part-time secretary/treasurer/curator. To add, the space did not have proper environmental conditions for the museum. In the winter, it was cold and dry, and in the summer, it was hot and humid. These conditions would have destroyed the artifacts and documents, on top of the lack of space to store these archives in the first place. The Society also began to lack display space for the growing collection. The Society described their collection and display as bulging. They can neither display the artifacts nor have room for staff to work properly. They battled with these issues for years, and therefore in spring 1972 they had decided to search for a larger space. The Society looked at forming a partnership with the City Historical Sites Board. They were arranging an agreement that would have the Society manage the displays for various historical sites. This included the armories, the Ermitanger Old Stone House, now the Ermitanger Clerg National Historic Site, this Marine Museum, and City Hall. The Historic Sites Board would aid in implementing their programs at the municipal level. Although the idea was greatly discussed, it was never implemented. There is some speculation on the one reason why the Society and Historical Sites Board did not merge was the splitting of the regiment and the Society. In 1980, the Ontario Ministry of Culture and Recreation introduced museum standards and made it a requirement to receive funding. Therefore, the need to find a new museum space so the Society could implement these standards became imperative. The Society had hoped to find a modern museum space close to the Ermitanger Old Stone House. With Parks Canada moving into the space at the canal, the Society contacted them in hopes of acquiring space. However, Parks did not have any available space. Following that, there were suggestions of constructing a new building near the locks. Finally, the old post office building, or Old Dominion building, was suggested by a ministry official. There were a series of meetings with the federal departments currently occupying the space to discuss the use of the building. The Society acquired the site in 1981. And in 1982, an agreement was recorded between the 49th Field Regiment R.C.A. and the Sault Ste. Marie and 49th Field Regiment R.C.A. Historical Society, regarding the continuing collaboration. The agreement recognizes the debt owed to the regiment by the Society for providing the space in the armory, and states the intention of the Society to relocate to the new facility. Also included are the terms of ownership and long-term loans for the military artifacts and papers that would be transferred to the new museum space. In the old Dominion building was opened in 1983 by the Society under an agreement with the city of Sault Ste. Marie for the use of the building. And here we are in this old Dominion building still today after almost 40 years. The museum staff, volunteers, and proactive community members are grateful for the journey these historians and respected community members made to preserve our history and pioneer where the museum is today. Even now we have some struggles. Like being in this big building, we seem to have little space sometimes, requiring us to shift items and reorganize. But we make do and strive to become more modern in our practices and what we offer each and every day. Thank you to Nicole Curry, our collections assistant here at the Sault Museum, for doing the research for this podcast. And thank you to all our listeners for supporting the Sault Museum, currently and officially named the Sault Ste. Marie 49th Field Regiment R.C.A. Historical Society. Make sure you are following us on all social media platforms to stay up to date with all the things we have planned for Museum Month and the summer months to follow. Thank you for listening.